Welcome to the channel Vietnam War Memoirs. Forced to fight the enemy while being outmatched in nearly every way, and often with only a handful of men, Vietnamese commandos developed remarkably creative and highly effective combat tactics. Let's explore how they did it in Part 5 of the Memoirs of veteran soldier Viet Cong Dong. Every commando soldier was skilled at slipping through enemy wire defenses. But the barbed wire systems used by the Americans and South Vietnamese came in many different forms and were packed with numerous types of mines. The enemy was extremely cunning. They designed all kinds of traps and ambush devices. One tiny mistake was enough to get you killed instantly. The best mine removal specialist in our unit was Nguyen von Hoa, nicknamed Hoa Las. Hoa was born in 1950 and suffered from hak lao, ringworm, as people in northern Vietnam called it. Not crossed eyes, despite the nickname Las. The infection covered almost his entire body. If the rash appeared in only one spot, you could scratch it, but when it spread everywhere, you no longer knew where to scratch. Hoa came from Hun Yen, perhaps because it was the homeland of famous longan fruit. His skin was unusually fair, meaning he needed large amounts of mud camouflage to conceal himself properly. He had broad shoulders and walked with fast, powerful strides. And he had one peculiar habit. Whenever he fitted detonators onto mines or grenades, he would quietly hum some unknown melody deep in his throat, a song none of us could ever identify. Back in the north, we would have gladly challenged every musician and every sharp-eared music expert to come listen and figure out what song Hoa was humming. Surely, every one of them would have failed. Day after day, we endured those strange sounds, listening carefully and trying to analyze them. Eventually, we realized that the noises coming from his throat were not modern songs, not Kaya Luang opera, nor any traditional Chiao melody. They were simply pure improvisation. The Americans created countless tools designed for killing, and among them, mines were some of the most dangerous weapons of all. It is difficult to fully describe the level of ingenuity, calculation, cruelty, and sophistication built into American military technology. Every possible triggering mechanism was used. Tripwire mines, pressure-triggered mines, step-detonated mines, compression mines, pull-triggered mines, and many other highly advanced systems. Sometimes a tripwire could be no longer than the width of a handspan. That meant a soldier only needed to spread the wire obstacle apart by less than the width of a single hand, not even a full span, and boom. If the explosion did not kill you outright, it would at least leave you severely wounded. Many of our comrades were killed while infiltrating Lai Khe because of exactly that kind of mine. But it was not until late 1969, during operations crawling through the Lai Khe defenses, that we finally discovered this particular mine-laying tactic. Enemy bases and outposts were protected by many different kinds of barbed wire defenses, but the most dreaded were the tangled concertina barriers and, later, the so-called pigpen fences. These were barriers laid almost flat against the ground. You could not crawl underneath them, yet walking across them was impossible as well. The Americans had money and resources to spare, so they used barbed wire lavishly, layer upon layer, thick and dense, without concern for cost. Sometimes, slipping through just a single layer of wire could take 5 or 6 nights. And yet, Hoa still managed to get through safely and return alive. Not just once, either. He infiltrated those defenses many times. There were even occasions when he remained inside the enemy perimeter for several days, leaving the rest of us worried sick about him. In 1969, during a reconnaissance mission inside the Lei K base of the American Big Red 1 Division, we had to crawl through 6 separate layers of wire defenses. 3 of those layers were tangled concertina barriers, each made from 3 densely stacked coils woven tightly together. Every night, we managed to advance only a very short distance, while using up nearly half our supply of safety pins for locking mine triggers. It took us almost an entire month just to get through all 6 layers. Once we finally crawled our way inside, every one of us was nearly blinded by the electric lights. We had to steady ourselves for a moment before we could properly recognize the terrain around us. One careless move, and you could be shot instantly. Brother Nem Gok only guided me as far as the outer fence line. After that, he personally led Hoa through the wire barriers. Thanks to that, Hoa became the first among us younger recruits to successfully enter the Lei K base itself, because he already knew the routes inside. Hoa later took on the task of guiding the rest of us during subsequent infiltrations. Of course, each entry lasted only a short time. We hurried to observe and memorize everything possible: enemy firing positions, vehicle and artillery placements, ammunition depots, and especially the helicopter landing strips. The reconnaissance information was then passed up to higher command. And, after almost every such mission, Lei K would soon receive a visit from our artillery, Soviet-made KBNH-12 rockets, crashing into the base in bombardments. Night after night, Hoa would lead the men crawling toward enemy wire defenses to remove mines. Sometimes he brought back nearly a dozen in a single trip. On one occasion, he returned with 4 Claymore directional mines hanging from his body. Thanks to Hoa's remarkable skill, our unit acquired large numbers of enemy mines, along with explosive material recovered from unexploded bombs, to manufacture additional devices of our own. What impressed us most were the directional mines Hoa designed himself. He carefully arranged metal fragments inside captured enemy steel helmets and woven bamboo frames, crafted skillfully by Brother Hong. With that arrangement, the fragments blasted outward in concentrated clusters rather than scattering randomly, giving the mines extremely high killing power. Thanks to Hoa's idea of setting the mines, then crawling backward to erase all traces, our unit successfully lured soldiers from the ARVN 5th Division Rangers into traps, overturned a tank along Highway 13, and eliminated numerous enemy sweep patrols. Whenever we launched assaults against enemy outposts, Hoa always moved first. He slipped through the wire barriers like a lizard, infiltrating layer after layer to place timed explosives successfully inside enemy positions. With tactics like these, our unit was able not only to inflict heavy losses on the enemy, but also to preserve our own strength. Our slow but relentless style of fighting made the enemy extremely frustrated. Again and again, they organized ambushes to hunt us down, but we always detected them first. Several times, Hoa even carried mines himself to block the enemy's withdrawal routes, making them suffer the very traps they had prepared for us. After weeks of this constant cat-and-mouse game, we would often receive small certificates no larger than 3 fingers wide, recognizing us as heroic fighters, and among all of us, Hoa earned the most of them. Nguyen Van Hoa possessed yet another remarkable talent. He could throw knives with incredible accuracy. Whenever there was free time, he would gather us together to practice knife throwing. The set of 12 knives he had handmade and brought with him from the north gradually disappeared over time. Apart from one knife that missed its target entirely, 2 others struck members of the enemy local defense forces directly. The rest of us trained enthusiastically under our master of knife throwing as well, but none of us ever became truly skilled at it. In February 1970, the American Big Red 1 Division handed over the Lê K base to the South Vietnamese 5th Division, backed by American support, supplied with large quantities of weapons, and strengthened with larger troop numbers. The ARVN 5th Division launched repeated sweep operations deep into the forests. The fighting became increasingly brutal. But for us, such operations also created opportunities to lay traps and strike back. Unable to confront the enemy head-on, we relied on scattered ambushes and hidden traps to wear down their forces. The minefields carefully arranged by Hoa along enemy sweep routes repeatedly caught them by surprise and inflicted steady casualties. At the beginning of 1971, our unit selected one outstanding combat soldier. There was only one position available, far too few. Many men in the unit had remarkable achievements, but after much discussion and careful consideration, everyone unanimously chose Nguyen Van Hoa. No one argued or competed over it. In the middle of 1971, Nguyen Van Hoa received orders to travel to the Central Office headquarters to report combat experience and share his battlefield tactics. From that day on, we never saw that soldier again. Our unit was already small in number, constantly scattered across different areas, short on weapons, and gradually reduced by casualties. Because of that, we were only capable of carrying out harassment attacks rather than holding territory like the main force units. In combat, casualties were unavoidable. There were periods, especially toward the end of 1970, when nearly everyone in the unit was wounded. We had no proper medicine for treatment, and food supplies were perpetually scarce. For months at a time, we had no rice, no salt, and sometimes even ammunition ran dangerously low. The hardships piled upon one another endlessly. Yet not a single soldier complained. In truth, there was no one to complain to, and even if someone cried out in frustration, only he himself would hear it in the jungle. To this day, I still do not understand how we could have been so fearless, beyond reckless. Perhaps the entire unit, including wounded men still able to hold a rifle, accepted orders to remain on the ground, stay close to the enemy, and never abandon the battlefield. Strange, truly strange. Around the middle of February 1971, Brother Su, or Su, the man who had led us from the Central Office headquarters down to Military Subregion I, back in 1969, returned to our unit carrying good news. The enemy's Tuan Thang 1.71 campaign into northeastern Cambodia had failed. Our forces had badly defeated them at Sa Nua, Snol. We asked Brother Susu where exactly Sa Nua was on Cambodian territory, but even he did not know. Brother Susu also told us that after the 1968 TAT offensive, many small units like ours had continued operating across the southeastern region by now. Several of those scattered groups had been reorganized and merged into company, battalion, and even regiment-sized formations, and some had already won their first major battles. Long Nguyen, however, remained a strategically vital battlefield area. The news left our ears ringing, but we still felt excited hearing it. When we asked why our unit, along with several neighboring units, had not been merged into larger formations, and instead remained only small detachments, Brother Susu explained. With guerrilla-style warfare, small units are extremely effective. The enemy finds them very difficult to deal with. That is why the military sub-region has decided to keep things this way for now. When conditions are suitable, the units will eventually be merged. Along with the news, Brother Susu also brought 6 new soldiers to reinforce our unit. Kin, Lan, Tai from Hanoi, Luan and Lam from Phu and Medic Kai from Hai Dayang. Among the 6 newcomers, Kin, Lan, and Lam had all been first-year university students, though I never knew which schools they attended. Tai and Luan had been studying at technical colleges, while Medic Kai had enlisted back in 1969. All 6 had trained together for 4 months in Bok Jiang before being sent south. This group of recruits left a particularly strong impression on us. The biggest surprise came when Brother Susu delivered new orders from the military sub-region. 10 men were to be transferred out of our unit, including the entire Team 2, Team 3, Long from my own team, and 1 soldier from Brother Su's team, to form the core of a new unit operating deeper inside enemy-controlled territory, possibly around the Hokman Ba Diem area. We had no choice but to say goodbye to comrades who had fought beside us for nearly 2 years. Men whose personalities we understood completely, and with whom we had developed perfect coordination in battle. Brother Susu stayed with us for only 2 days before leading the men away to their new unit. He had served as an officer in the military sub-region forces since 1966 and had been wounded several times. Yet, despite everything, he never once asked to be sent back to the north. We truly admired him for that. Oh, help the new recruits understand the unit's situation and mission. Brother Beye spent an entire morning giving them what was essentially a field briefing. But no matter how carefully he explained things, the 6 newcomers still looked completely bewildered. To be honest, they seemed to understand almost nothing. What worried us even more was that Kin and Lan confidently told us, back in the north, we were already thoroughly briefed about all this. Hearing that only made us more uneasy. But after thinking it over, we realized we could not really blame the new recruits. They had only just arrived on the battlefield. Naturally, they could not yet fully understand the hardships and dangers waiting for them. After all, I had been exactly the same. Back in 1969, when I first joined the unit, I too had been awkward, inexperienced, and completely unaware of what lay ahead. I was simply fortunate enough to meet many experienced mentors who helped me adapt quickly and in time. Through real combat, these new recruits too would have many opportunities to test themselves, gain experience, and mature into hardened soldiers. Just like us when we first arrived, this group of recruits carried equipment that was far too bulky for the realities of battlefield life. They still wore loose-fitting toe-chow uniforms, carried frog-style backpacks, Chinese rubber sandals, medical pouches, blankets, mosquito nets, hammocks, and oversized canvas rain ponchos. Even their wooden stock AK rifles still looked brand new, complete with untouched bayonets attached. In short, their gear was far too heavy. We advised them to abandon their backpacks, cut pieces from their blankets to make lighter carrying sacks, trim down their mosquito nets and hammocks, and most importantly, stop wearing rubber sandals and move barefoot for better mobility and stealth. But our words seemed to roll off them like water off taro leaves. Only after endless persuasion did the new recruits finally begin to listen. As we discussed reorganizing the combat teams, one of the new recruits, Kinj, unexpectedly volunteered to become a team leader. It had been a very long time since we had seen such confidence from a newly arrived soldier. We had to admit, this young man certainly had character. Brother Bea was delighted by Kin's initiative and immediately appointed him as a team leader. He even granted Kin the privilege of choosing his own team members, something that had never happened before in our unit. Without hesitation, Kin selected Lam, Lan, and Luan, the friends who had enlisted and trained alongside him. In truth, the arrangement made sense. If an older veteran had been inserted into their group, things might not have worked smoothly at all. The two new recruits, Luan and Tai, were assigned as B-40 rocket launcher gunners. Luan, in particular, was an extremely curious fellow. He kept handling the B-40 launcher over and over, examining every detail with fascination. Then, at one point, he flipped open the breech mechanism and raised the launcher as if preparing to take aim, though, fortunately, no rocket had been loaded. Seeing this, I immediately grabbed the launcher and pulled it down. I quickly explained to Luan, the firing pin of the B-40 is extremely fragile. If you pull the trigger without a rocket loaded, it can snap instantly, and without a replacement firing pin, the weapon becomes completely useless. Luan's face turned pale at once. He had nearly disabled one of the unit's most important weapons. After bringing the new recruits back to the bunker, Thao patiently showed Thao how to hang his hammock, arrange his pack, and position the B-40 launcher, along with its 6 rockets, in a combat-ready spot. He also pointed out the observation sectors Thao would need to watch during guard duty. Thao picked everything up very quickly. I felt relieved to see that we had gained another alert and capable soldier. On our first night getting acquainted, we lay in our hammocks, talking quietly together. Thai told me that his home was on Cam Thien Street in Hanoi. His father was a factory worker. His mother earned a living selling goods at the market, and he had 2 younger sisters studying in the 7th and 9th grades, along with a youngest brother in the 4th grade. Tai also proudly mentioned that he already had a girlfriend living on the same street back home. Listening to him, I could not help but feel sympathy. This young soldier carried far too many thoughts and emotions in his heart. To help the new soldiers become familiar with the battlefield, Brother Bea carefully explained the terrain and operational areas around Dao Tinjiang, Bi Dayan Cat, Bao Bang, and Ku Chi in remarkable detail. The recruits listened with their mouths hanging open, utterly amazed by their commander's memory and knowledge of the region. In our unit, every newcomer had to learn everything again from the beginning. It was a mandatory rule. Because this was a real battlefield, the bombs and bullets were real. The enemy was real flesh and blood. Their bunkers were heavily fortified, their wire barriers and minefields dense and deadly. And the casualties were real as well. In front of a soldier stood the enemy. Behind him, there was no one. Only comradeship remained, men living and dying together. That was why we had to teach the new recruits the skills of self-reliance, so they could adapt and survive. Night after night, Ty would tell stories about life back in the north. We listened mostly to encourage him, because in truth, after being away from home for so long, surrounded constantly by brutal fighting and bombardment, we hardly had time left for nostalgia. On the other hand, Ty was especially eager to hear Tao talk about the unit's experiences. Tao had a real talent for storytelling. Even I, who had personally lived through those events, sometimes felt as though he was describing the exploits of some legendary unit rather than our own. And as he spoke, he would pause now and then to explain things carefully. During infiltration, a commando had to press his body as flat and compact to the ground as possible while crawling through 6 or 7 layers of different wire barriers. At the same time, he had to place guide markers, probe for mines, and constantly observe enemy movements. All around him were sharpened stakes and dense minefields. One tiny mistake, no matter how small, and there would not even be time for regret. And on top of that, enemy flare rounds would light up the entire night sky so brightly that even a needle on the ground could be seen clearly. If you failed to quickly cover the barrel of your weapon, you would almost certainly be exposed, because the metal surface of the barrel could reflect light and give away your position. The deeper you crawled inside, the closer you came to the enemy's gun barrels, and the greater the chance of taking a bullet, especially near machine gun nests and guard posts, where the American soldiers would chatter loudly among themselves. In English, we never knew what they were saying. Sometimes they would casually toss cigarette butts outside their bunkers, and without warning, they might suddenly open fire in long bursts into the darkness, simply to intimidate anything beyond the perimeter. So, you had to remain absolutely calm and move with extreme care. The soldiers carrying M79 grenade launchers had another dangerous habit. They would fire their rounds in shifting grid patterns, like squares on a chessboard. No one could predict which area they would target next. That was why you had to move quickly whenever the opportunity appeared, or risk taking a grenade blast head-on. There were countless dangerous situations if you lost your way in the jungle. Sooner or later, you could still find your way back to the unit. But the thing we feared most was dying inside the enemy wire defenses. If the comrades could not recover your body, the enemy would desecrate your remains. For commandos, the enemy could be especially brutal. Sometimes, they would mutilate the bodies of fallen soldiers, place grenades inside them, and leave the corpses hanging on the wire barriers as traps for anyone attempting to recover the dead. There were also cases where bodies were dragged back to Thu Dal Muat town and displayed publicly as trophies, both to boast of their victories and to intimidate the local population. That was how the Americans behaved. But the South Vietnamese forces could be even more cunning. They were willing to lie in wait outside the wire barriers, patiently waiting for Viet Cong Commandos to come recover their comrades. Faced with such an open gate to death, anyone who claimed he felt no fear at all would simply be lying. Anything could happen, and if you were wounded inside the wire barriers, you had to grit your teeth and endure the pain in silence. You could not cry out if even a single groan gave away the unit's position. None of the men would survive. If the wound was not too severe, you had to force yourself to crawl back toward the breach point so your comrades could help pull you out. That was not even counting the mental pressure of crawling close enough to touch the enemy, yet still not being allowed to fire at those moments. All you could do was wait and breathe as quietly as possible. Some loudmouths liked to boast that they could hold their breath the entire time. But who could truly stop breathing for tens of minutes inside enemy wire defenses? Those moments of waiting felt endless. Only when the signal shot was finally fired did all fear suddenly disappear. The moment you managed to throw the first explosive charge and destroy a machine gun nest, a bunker, or a cluster of enemy soldiers, almost everyone forgot that death was hanging over their heads. By the time you had thrown half your supply of charges, your mind would steady again, and you would regain enough composure to move on and attack the next assigned targets. Once the mission of opening the breach was completed, or once you had run out of explosives, grenades, and satchel charges, you had to find the exit point immediately, then crawl out as fast as possible. Faster and faster if you could. Only after returning safely to base could you finally consider yourself alive. Because commando warfare depended entirely on secrecy and surprise. Every assignment had to be carried out exactly as ordered. One reckless deviation could ruin the entire operation. Tao went on talking for quite a long time afterward, and Tao listened as though completely spellbound, letting out quiet exclamations of amazement, again and again. Even after learning so many hard-earned lessons and field experiences, Tai would still make mistakes once he entered real combat. What happened to him on the battlefield will be revealed in Part 6. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story. Please feel free to share your thoughts and opinions about the content with us.